This is 9.2 box and whiskers. So the first thing we have to do on all of these is get the information in order. So looking at this first set of data, the smallest number is 3, then 5, then a second 5, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 14, 15. Okay, so now that our information is in order, we're going to work from the middle out. So we have to find our median. Our median is going to end up between 8 and 9. So 8 plus 9 is 17, divided by 2 is 8.5. So that's your median. So now we need to find the middle number in the lower half of the data, the Q1. So our Q1 is 5. Our Q3 is the middle number in the upper half of the data, so it's 12. And then our minimum and our maximum. So now we have all 5 pieces needed in order to graph our box plot. So the minimum was 3. Our Q1 is 5. Our median is 8.5. Our Q3 is 12. Max 15. So the mean of this information, so when we add up all of these numbers and divide by how many numbers there are, which is 10, we end up with 8.8. Now this symbol right here is another way to say the mean. So with the X with the line over the top, that represents your mean. Now mode, the number that shows up the most is 5, and the range is the distance from your lowest to highest point. So 15 minus 3 gives us a range of 12. So now we can plot this in a box plot. So we have our first number is 3. We've got to number our number line first. So we've got, let's make it 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so now that our number line is numbered, we can go through and make our box plot. So minimum 3. Our Q1 is 5. Our median is 8.5. Our Q3 is 12, and our maximum is 15. So now we draw the box around the 3 in the middle. It's always from your Q1 to your Q3, and then the whiskers for the minimum and maximum. So then looking at this one, it says we need to find the minimum, the IQR, the range, the Q3, and which quartile has the most variation. So remember, the 5-number summary is always comprised of this, 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 and this. So I can go ahead and label everything and make my life a little bit easier. So if this point is 0, that means Q1 is 1. We have 5, 6, and 8. So when we go to label everything, our minimum is 0. Our Q3 is 6. The IQR, remember, is your Q3, the distance from Q1 to Q3. So 6 minus 1 gives us an IQR of 5. The range is the entire thing. So from the minimum to the maximum, the distance. So we have 8 minus 0 is 8. And then it says which quartile has the most variation. So what it's looking for is which quartile is the most spread out. So when we look at it, this section right here is the most spread out. That is the second quartile. So it's the second piece of it, the second quartile, which is from Q1 through the median, or Q2. Moving on to the next one, it says we need to use this one to determine the minimum, the IQR, the Q1, and the median. So this one looks a little bit different because there's not a second whisker and there's only one block in your box. That doesn't mean you don't have this information. It just means that the mode is going to be equal to where all of that missing information looks like it is. So when we look at this, we have 4, 3, and 7. So our IQR is the distance in the box. So from 3 to 4, 4 minus 3 is 1. Your median is in the middle of the box. Well, because we don't really have a middle, it doesn't mean that there's not a median. It just means that that 3 is your median. It's also your minimum and your Q1. So the mode for this is going to be 3 because that's where most of that information is showing up. So which quartile has the most variation? Which one's the most spread out? Is this one right here, which is the 4th quartile, which is really from Q3 to the max. And then the last one. So label, label, label first. So we have 0. This one is approximately 1, approximately 2. Okay, so now we can answer everything. Our minimum is 0. The maximum is 6. The maximum is 6. We've got an outlier that's 9. So we don't want to include that outlier in our box plot just because it's so far outside the set of data. And then our median is 2 in the middle of the box. So given the following dot plots, find the information needed to create a box and whisker plot. So the first thing I like to do is actually make a numerical sequence out of this. Some people like to just look at it based on the dots. I prefer to make a list of my numbers. So I see that I have 2 3s, 4 4s, 6 5s, 4 6s, and 2 7s. So from here, I can do everything I did on the last one. So we're going to find the middle, which is right there. So 5 plus 5 is 10, divided by 2 is 5. And then we have to find our Q1. So find the middle in the lower half of the data. So it's this 4. And then your Q3, which is the middle in the upper half of the data, your minimum, and your maximum. So now that we have our 5-number summary, we can fill in everything else. So we have a minimum of 3, a Q1 of 4, a median 5, Q3 6, and a max of 7. So remember, range is the distance from your minimum to your maximum. So 7 minus 3 is 4. Mode is the number that shows up the most, and on that dot plot, there's the most dots above 5, so that's my mode. And then the mean, you add up all the numbers, divide by how many data pieces there are, and you would get 5. Now, IQR is your Q3 minus Q1. So 6 minus 4 is 2, and then the outliers. So we need to do the formula. So our formula, remember, for the lower fence is Q1, which in this case was 4, minus your IQR, which we already found is 2, times 1.5. Now, what I left in black is straight from the formula, and what's in green are the values that I had to change, my Q1 and my IQR. So when I plug that into the calculator, it gives me a 1. And then we can find our upper fence, which is your Q3, which in this situation was 6, plus your IQR, which is 2, times 1.5. When you plug that into the calculator, you get 9. So to determine if there's any outliers, we have to ask, are there any numbers lower than the lower fence in that set of data? Our lower fence is 1. There is no number less than 1 in our set of data. And then we have to find out, is there any number higher than our upper fence? Our upper fence is 9. There's no numbers higher than 9, so there are no outliers for this set of data. So that means we can just put this straight onto the number line as our box plot. So our minimum was, right, number line. So at this point, we can draw it on there. We have our minimum was 3. Our Q1 is 4, median 5, Q3 6, and the maximum 7. So our box plot looks like that. So the next one at the bottom of this page is one that you guys get to do for your work session. So be sure once you've completed it to get your answer checked through the answer key on Canvas, or you can come see me. So when we flip to the next page, we have a table of our information, and it tells us to make a stem and leaf plot. To do that, we have to set it up. So we have our stem and leaf plot is 0, 1, 2, 3. I'm writing too big. So remember, your tens go on the left side. So we have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And you do not skip numbers when creating these. So looking at our information, we have 42. So we go down to the 4 and we put a 2 to the right. And then we have 47. So we're going to put a 7 there as well. But these numbers on the right side have to be in order. So I want to check and make sure there's not any other numbers that would come before that 47. So typically what I do on these is I find all of the values with the same tens. So I see that 0 and 5 are the only single digit numbers. So that's 0 and 5. So they're taken care of. So now anything with a 1 in the tens place? No. Anything with a 2 in the tens place? I see 24, 23. So we want them in numerical order. So next to the 2, we put 3 for 23 and a 4 for 24. And we're finished with those. So now we can look at the next one, the 3s. So I have 30, another 30 and a 39, and a 35. So I have 2 30s. So there's one 30, there's the second 30, 35, and 39. Now back to my 40s. So I started with this 42. There's also a 47, 45, 45, 45, and 49. So I have 3 45s, a 47, and a 49. And then to the 50s, there's 51, 56, 58, and 55. So when I put those in numerical order, there's 51, 55, 56, and 58. And the last two numbers are 75s, so I'm going to put those down here next to the 5. So there's one 75 and the other 75. Now, when it comes to a stem and leaf plot, you want to make sure that your numbers line up. So like all of these numbers line up and all of these numbers line up. So that way you can see which tens has the biggest, that has the most of a number. Okay, so just like on a dot plot, figuring out which one has the most. All right, so when we add up all these numbers that were in that given table and we divide by how many numbers there were, we get 41.45. Now looking at this, I see that in the 4s, there's 3 5s, so that means my mode is 45. There's the most 45s. The range is from 75 to 0, so 75 minus 0 is 75. The minimum is 0. Now, for the Q1, you can go through your table, your stem and leaf plot, and actually figure this out. So I'm going to get a very pale shade and do this. So I have one on this side, one on this side. It's just like doing the cover-up method. So I have this one, this one, this one, this one. And it's between 45 and 45. So 45 and 45 gives me a median of 45, because 45 is halfway between 45 and 45. Now my Q1, so I know my median was right here. So Q1 is the middle number in the lower half. So if I do the same thing, I have crossed it out. Oops. This one, that's hard to see. And it's going to be 30. Do the same thing with the upper half. So we have that one, this one. And it's between 55 and 56. So that's 55.5. Excuse me on that. Sorry, it's between the 51 and the 56. I'm actually going to erase all my highlighter marks if I can, so that I can redo that. All right, I'm going to put my numbers back. Hang on. Okay, so when I cover up again, so I've got this one, this one, this one. There it is. So it's between 51 and 55. So 51 plus 55 is 106, divided by 2 is 53, and then our maximum is 75. And again, guys, if it's hard for you guys to figure out finding the median, the Q1 and the Q3 from a stem and leaf plot, you can always turn it into a list of numbers in order as well. All right, so our IQR is Q3 minus Q1. Q3 is 53, Q1 is 30, so the difference between those is 23. And then the outliers, checking for outliers. So again, our lower fence, which I'm going to refer to as LF, is your Q1, which is 30, minus your IQR, which is 23, times 1.5. Plug that into a calculator and you get negative 4.5. And then your upper fence is your Q3, which is 53, plus your IQR times 1.5, which gives you 87.5. So because there's no numbers lower than the lower fence or higher than the upper fence, there are no outliers. So when we go to plot this on our number line, first things first, you got to number it. And then you can do your dots. So we have a minimum of 0, a Q1 of 30, a median of 45, Q3 of 53, and a maximum of 75. Remember the middle three, so from your Q1 to your Q3 is your box, and your whiskers reach out to the minimum and maximum. And jumping down to the last little bit. So it says match the following data sets represented in the dot plots with the most appropriate measure of center based solely on the data. So in the first one, the first thing I notice is that most of the numbers in the set of data are 10. So that means that the mode is going to be the best measure of center. So 10 represents more than 50% of the data set. So that means the mode is the best measure of center. So on the second one, we have an outlier. We have this little bitty over here on the left. It is outside the grouping of the data. So because there's an outlier, way far away from the rest of the data, the median is the best measure of center. And then the last one, most of the information is relatively close. So meaning that there's no outliers, not all of the information is in one place, so therefore the mean is the best measure of center for that one.